Kia ora, g'day, welcome back here with part two and hopefully the final part of my reaction to this Battle of Kamdesh, COP Keating, Combat Outpost Keating. So let's jump back in.
And then Carter ended up showing up with more ammo, but we didn't have a workable weapon system. So at that point, we heard over the radio that Charlie was in the wire.
X-ray, enemy in the wire, enemy in the wire, everybody fall back.
And we could see an enemy fighter climb over the wall right in front of us as we were sitting in the Humvee. And that,
man, this is hectic, eh? Crazy in terms of what these guys went through. You know, again, hence why I mentioned, I think in the first reaction, the leaders that decided to put COP Keating or this combat outpost in that particular part of the ground need to have their bloody heads red, man.
that's when we came up with a hasty plan we were going to bound back to what we called the Alamo position. I was in the driver's seat. Carter was right behind me. Gallegos was in the truck commander's seat, essentially riding shotgun. And again, this Humvee will not move. And we knew we had to move because it was just a matter of time until they got one through that killed us all. It was
Damn, just the hearing this guy speak now at this time so calmly and clearly based on his recollections and his experience around, I think he spoke about moving back to the Alamo position, basically the last stand, where they likely thought, well, we're going to get back there and this is where we're going to make our last stand and probably not come out of this. Like the mindset to, you know, being in those situations, being with their brothers. I don't know how many lives were lost in this, you know, I'm guessing we'll hear about it or something will show up at the end, but crazy, man. Hectic, to say the least. Understatement.
At that point, we were going to bound back to the Shura building, to the Alamo position. As soon as we said 1, 2, 3, go, here we go, they bounded, we exited, started hammering with the M4. That's when I took one to the helmet, came through about 1/4 of an inch, didn't hit me in the head. RPGs started hitting, machine guns opened fire, and that's when Mace got hit with an RPG, took out his legs. Gallegos went down. Didn't see where Martin went. He ended up going over a big rock. That's when Carter and I got back into the Humvee because it was the enemy fire again was overwhelming, and guys were dropping. Guys were getting hit by the enemy.
I think hearing the radio talk in the operations center too, and hearing
interesting, the call and the decision to get back in the Humvee, which is they can't move it. It's a big fat static target, nice juicy target for an RPG, like much bigger than a person. Tragic to hear about what happened to their mates getting hit, guy hit with an RPG and taking out the legs. I mean, you're sitting in an armored Humvee, but I don't know. It's just interesting, the decision, the thought process. I'm not there on the ground. These guys are the ones making the decisions, and thankfully he and some of his friends are still alive. I don't know how many lost their lives.
Gallegos' voice and the desperation of him needing ammo and the overwhelming fire that he had at his location, it made me pucker my butthole up and just hit that door and go do what I was trained to do and what my platoon expects me to do. From here, my radio went down. I was sending the grids back into the operations center, but I lost the feel on my radio, just like, you know, every war movie that you see. For some reason, a weapon's either going to get jammed, even no matter how much you clean it, or your radio loses its feel. So I had to end up running back and forth from the aid station to the operations center.
Buongiorno, Brett. Turn on your DeLonghi. Pick your beans.
And the aid station was small. We're talking about a room that's 25 by 25 feet, pretty small area, but we had And so that's what we had to work with. And I remember grabbing the radio and my hand was just tremoring. I couldn't hold it still. And Jeff Hobbs kind of looked at me. He's like,
understandable. I mean, what's happening to them there in that moment? It's crazy though, still to me, to think that maybe these guys and the leaders, again, coming back to the leaders, didn't think that this was something that could possibly happen in that space, surrounded by mountains. Like, surely. Yeah, anyway.
Jeff, great guy, not a very emotional dude. He's pretty dry, pretty vanilla. He kind of looks at me and says, "Hey, Doc, I'm pretty scared." Just his tone. And he could see my hand just tremoring while I'm holding the radio. And I looked at him like, yeah, I'm pretty fucking scared too.
So after that, that's when Clint had gone to the headquarters building and talked with Lieutenant Bunderman and Sergeant Hill about a plan to push back out and attempt to go recover our wounded, go recover our KIA, and take our...
Essentially push back out and get back in the fight is what I'm hearing. Getting together and then making that decision sounds like that's what they're talking about, or sounds like that's what he's talking about. And ultimately, I'm guessing that's probably what they did.
Caught back, because if we kept doing what we were doing, we were gonna die. We had no air cover at this time. We had no artillery support. We were all by ourselves with 300 Taliban just imposing.
Literally in one of the worst positions ever to be identified by some sort of leader to put a combat outpost there for soldiers to then go and occupy and expect to defend. And on top of that, there are no assets or resources available to you. No, nothing. You're literally, come here, lads, go to this place. I wonder what the intent was. Yeah, hearts and minds, speaking with locals and stuff there, but surely there must have been more to it than that. And you can do that from much better positions to give yourself a better chance of survival, rather than just putting yourself right at the bottom and surrounding yourself by all these mountains where the Taliban are known to occupy and use for defensive positions and to fight from. Nuts.
Their will on us.
Carter and I were pinned in the Humvee for what seemed like a couple days. It was a few hours. At one point, the Apaches had showed up.
So once air support checks on station, it gives you a whole new power. That's the one thing the U.S. military has always had, is air superiority. It's kind of like your dad coming in, you know what I mean, when you're having a tough time in a ball game and reassuring you, it's going to be okay. You know what I mean? So once air support checked on station, it gave us more room to breathe. And we sat back a little bit and just let those Apaches do what they needed to do, engage targets. So we used air support, the bombing runs, and the Apache gun runs as covering fire to get Brad Larson, Mace, and Carter back to the aid station, because at this point we knew Stephen Mace was gravely wounded and wasn't going to make it much longer, so we had to get him back right now.
I could still hear pretty good gunfights going on. We were just isolated and had no heavy weapon system. Anytime we tried to engage the enemy, sniper fire would come through our windows. It was
pretty awesome to hear the other guy with the big long ZZ top beard speaking about the Air Force and the air superiority and the Apache gunships coming in there. And what he says, like your dad coming in on a baseball game or something. And man, the boost that those guys give to troops on the ground, I'm sure they know, the Air Force that is, but man, it just can't be understated. Can't be stated enough in terms of the boost and the lift that gives. I've not been in a situation like what these guys have been in, not at all. But we had a STS guy. His name was Clint, actually. I think I heard one of these guys mention a person by the name of Clint. He's one of the STS guys, Special Tactics Squadron, attached to our team. We had, was it 3 of them? I want to say 3. Yeah, I think there's 3 of them, 1 for each troop. And the one that we had for our troop just happened to be in our team. Sorry. Let's turn that off. Happened to be in our team, or my patrol. And young fella, but just the added level of comfort that it brings having an STS guy, at least for our patrol and our troop and our squadron at that time, especially when fast jets were moving up overhead, and we did see one bank And one of our, like my patrol commander, had done a forward air controller course, FAC, I think it was called back then, or shortened to FAC. And he was like, hey, like, we need to get onto that in case they think we're enemy and they go and bloody do a bomb run on us. So, yeah, they sparked up the radio. Clint got on there and, yeah, identified who we were to the jet that was overhead. And thankfully, we didn't get bombed. But, yeah, having that air superiority, what it must have felt like for them. But I can imagine.
About that point when Carter was in the truck commander's seat and he saw Mace moving, so we devised a plan to get Mace and get him back into the Humvee. Carter went down, grabbed him. I covered. We put him in the Humvee, tried to address his wounds as best we could. His legs were essentially gone, and his abdomen was completely shredded open. All he wanted was a cigarette. Carter, being on the right side, exited the Humvee, went down to check on Gallegos. He was KIA, but he did have a radio, an ICOM radio. So Carter brought that back. I called up any station, this net. This is the Red Dragon. I got a response, told him Mace was really, really bad, needed attention. I talked to, I believe, Bunderman on the radio, who said, if I give you some support, you think you can get Mace to the aid station? I said, absolutely. He said, when you hear the big boom, get him on a stretcher. We had stretchers set up right next to us already just for this. Heard the boom, felt the boom, biggest boom I've ever felt in my life. Exited the vehicle, told Mace, I said, hang on, this is going to hurt like a motherfucker. Put his weapon beside him. We picked him up, headed towards the aid station. Saw Griffin laying on our path. Dropped Mace off, gave him to Cordova, and they immediately, the medics started working on him. He was priority number one at that point.
At that point, Mace had been injured since 6 a.m., so he'd been injured for 6 hours. Every time you look at a patient, you have an initial assessment, your initial...
He had been injured and in that way for 6 hours. Holy heck.
Clinical impression of him at first didn't look favorable. He was very pale, not coherent in his words, so we kind of assessed, alert and oriented. He was not alert and oriented. He was not getting blood flow to his brain because he had lost so much blood. 2:30, 3 o'clock. I know we're not getting a medevac helicopter in anytime soon. Clearly, he had lost blood. Clearly, he needed blood. And so we need to figure out a way to deliver blood. And so that's when Shane, Cody, Jeff, and I kind of huddled and was like, hey, this is what we need. This is what we need to do. Mace's dog tag was A positive. There were three of us. 3 of the 4 of us were A positive. Myself, Cody Floyd.
Wow. I'm guessing they start giving blood, just rotating through, filling up blood bags. Just that. That's what I'm thinking.
Jeff Hobbs. And so we had a hell of a time getting IV access for Mace. He had lost so much blood that all of his veins were collapsed. The one venous cut down that we did, that one had gotten pulled out and we just could not find any veins that were stickable. Like if you lose so much blood, all of his blood flow had been shunted from his extremities to his vital organs. That's the natural body kind of preservation method, is when you're in shock, all the blood stays in your core. And so you can't get IV access because there's no blood anywhere else. And so the external jugular vein is an option. It's not your first option, but in that situation, that extreme situation, we elected to pursue that. And Jeff Hobbs was successful at getting IV access to his external jugular vein. So now,
wow, far out through the external jugular vein. Yeah, I could imagine not being the first option. Like, we've done patrol medics course, nothing to that level. Obviously, this guy's a doctor, highly specialized skill sets and stuff with these guys here, and just, man, crazy.
we had access to administer the whole blood that we had withdrew from Cody, and we They hooked the IV tubing up to the catheter, hung the bag, and watched and waited, and scared and didn't know if we were going to cause further harm or if he was going to respond well. We didn't know. And about probably 15, 20 minutes after kind of the bag had gone through, it sounds miraculous. He really started to perk up. Mace would start speaking. He was speaking words. He could put together sentences. He was complaining of pain. He wanted to smoke a cigarette. On a shitty day, kind of the worst day you could ever experience, it was kind of a light of hope. And like, man, we're one, we're going to make it out of here. And then two, we think I think Mace is going to make it.
Part of.
Wow. That must have been such a boost. I hope he does. I hope he does make it. Like, and maybe they'll show him at the end.
Romashay's plan involved recovering the fallen that he apparently already knew that we lost because his direct ties with the operations center. And I knew that moment that was going to be my role for that day, was to go retrieve the fallen. When I gathered my team, we stacked up and was just waiting for Romashay's call to actually start my part of the counteroffensive, which is to go retrieve Geigels' and Martin's body. Once I find out where he's directing me towards, I take off to where Geigels is located, which is another about 30 yards away. Me believing that he was still alive just because of the way his body was. So I had a lot of encouragement, I guess, to make the dash, because I was under the impression that he was still returning fire. Everything was laid out like he was returning fire off a machine gun. But when I walked up to him and actually placed my hand on his shoulder, I think that was a realization that, he's not there no more.
I was just going to say, I've been super, just impressed, maybe somewhat surprised at how well these men have held it together, talking about reliving, obviously, a horrendous and massively traumatic experience for these guys. This is probably the first, I want to say, bit of emotion in terms of the guys retelling and talking about some of the stuff that they witnessed and that they were a part of.
9 p.m. that night, we had enough security in place, and medevac helicopters started to come in to evacuate the wounded and also retrieve the fallen soldiers from that day. So we put Mace on the helicopter sent him with a bag. I donated a bag of blood at this point myself. 2 other soldiers donated a bag of blood. I think 5 total bags of blood were donated directly from soldiers, and we send him with one on the medevac helicopter, and they Mace, you made it, bro. You're gonna make it out of here. And fast forward a few hours later on, ran into First Sergeant Burton. I was like, hey man, how's Mace doing? Like my mind is like, hey, he's doing great. I just want to update, a positive update. And he kind of looked at me with a little head nod, and I was like, defeated, absolutely defeated. That we did make it.
Oh man,
that hurt.
Gutted. Just with everything that I was hearing, I was thinking, oh man, this guy Mace must have made it. Maybe we'll get to see him speak at the end, but obviously not. Man, heartbreaking. I bet. All right for these. For this guy and for everybody involved in the guys lost that day. I still don't know how many lives were lost at Cop Keating, Battle of Kamdesh. Maybe we'll see or hear that at the end.
Yeah. I think the guys that didn't make it back are the ones that need to be spoken about the most. 14 years later, all these guys would have been in their 30s now, and the sacrifices they made. They left behind wives, they left behind children. Their whole entire life was ahead of them, right? Their story wasn't over, and it was cut short, unfortunately. So at least what we can do is just by honor them and telling their story of the heroic things they did, and the ones they left behind. Like a guy like Faulkner who, came home after he was wounded and was battling those demons, and eventually he was susceptible to his own thoughts and his demons that he had. And
sounds like did this guy commit suicide or something? Like that's what I'm guessing based on the way this guy's speaking. Susceptible to his own thoughts, demons that he is facing.
Like it was shortly after the rest of the unit had gotten back, he had passed from an overdose, right? Because he wasn't coping with it right.
Man, sad, man. I mean, it's hard. Like, I'm sure every effort was being made to try to support him. I'd like to think it was anyway, surely. And sometimes, yeah, like, people go through what it is that they go through, and oftentimes doesn't matter what anybody else says or how much they encourage or how positive they might be or try to be for them. Ultimately, at the end of the day, like it comes down to the individual, and the individual has to want to be around, has to, yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but anyway.
I don't know what was actually happening, but I know it was a contributing factor, because he did say he was having a rough time. Him and Griffin and Scusa went to Iraq together, so they already had that bond from all of their previous deployment, and then go back to this and lose two of them was probably a pretty hard toll on him. But like even telling his story, so I think that's the only way you can ever do it justice.
I like what he's spoken about there. Oh, what's this? In the aftermath of the battle, 8 US soldiers were KIA, 8 and 27 wounded. The subsequent death of SPC Edward Faulkner in 2010 due to an overdose while battling post-traumatic stress brought the total number of fatalities to 9. Wow. I love the way that guy just spoke about, talking about them and honoring them. But I think, important to remember the guys that are alive too, because they're still carrying those scars, and, they lost their brothers too. And so the impact on them and the potential for them to, who knows, maybe have a relapse isn't the right term, but you know what I mean, have thoughts that could take them down a dark path sort of thing. And just the need for them to be there for each other and be given whatever support they need is basically what I'm getting at. And I hope that is happening, and that's what happens, and that whoever the boss was in charge of that, bloody hell, I hope he's been sacked. The boss in charge of identifying that ground in that area. Just nuts. For the Bravo on October 3rd, Bravo Troop 361 Cavalry became the most decorated unit of the Afghanistan War. Wow. I hope the bloody Rupert involved in that organising and the strategic planning didn't get anything other than bloody fired or thrown in prison.
So Romeshay and Carter both received the Medal of Honor. I don't even know how many Purple Hearts handed out to guys that were wounded, but the guys that don't get recognized, I don't think enough. Colonel Cordova as the medic, the head medic, Shane Corville Hobbs, the medics, the Armando Avalos, the unsung heroes, the guys that don't get recognition. I would like to recognize them. Them are the guys that don't want recognized and should be recognized.
Yeah, I was just going to say, they're probably the guys that don't want to be recognized anyway. They're just probably glad that they're able to be there to do their job and to help out as best they could. pause that there. Black Rifle, shout out Black Rifle Coffee Company for, I've just come across some of their stuff. There's this reaction. I think there's another video of theirs that I did. Apologies, I can't remember, but I know I'm putting the links in the description of the videos anyway to where people can find the videos. So why not give them a like and subscribe as well and support these guys, Black Rifle Coffee Company. But appreciate your time, eh? I know this is only a snippet. It's only like a 30-minute, 29.5-minute, 30-minute piece on the Battle of Kamdesh, COP Keating. Now that I know what that is, Combat Outpost Keating. But amazing. And the most decorated unit of the Afghan war. Pretty incredible, but still just mind-blowing to me that a position like that was even thought of and or considered as a good and or viable option for soldiers to go and be positioned in. Again, whoever made those decisions, there should be a documentary or a video like this made about those twats and try to get inside the head of the clowns that not only come up with that plan, but then whoever the other clowns were that approved it and said, yep, let's that sounds like a good idea, mate. Let's put our troops in there. Trucking ridiculous. But anyway, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for your support. For any comments and stuff that you might want to chuck down below, I'm not sure. Be interested to read and see your thoughts. I've read some of the thoughts on some of the other, on the first part 1, which I agree with a lot of those comments there as well. But grateful that there's people like this that will go out there and that are still fighting, that will look to do what they can where they can for their mates, I guess. It could be, the assumption could be made that, well, it may be easier to do or easy to do when your back is to the wall and you've got no other option, fight or die. But still, I don't think it's that easy. There's still a number of people when backs are to the wall that don't necessarily show and or have the courage that these men showed in terms of their actions and what they did. So, anyway, as always, the message is the same, regardless of any challenges, difficulties that you may be going through, keep turning up, keep staying in the fight, put one foot in front of the other, just take one day at a time. Know and trust that things can do and will get better as long as you want them to. So you do have to want them to. And just know and trust that better days are always closer than you and I think, and that there is a light at the end of that tunnel. So as always, go always a little further. Remember, who dares wins and who cares wins. And until the next video, there is a big mana wave coming from me to you, filled with my aroha, respect, appreciation, and gratitude for you all.